Welcome back. This is Lesson 5 for How to Compose Music 101, brought to you by artofcomposing.com. In today's lesson, we're going to be learning all about functional harmony. Specifically, in today's lesson, you're going to learn how to write your own chord progressions, how to prolong a harmony without making it boring or repetitive, and how to reharmonize your melody using different chords. If you remember from the basic harmony lesson, we went over scales and chords. To recap, there are basically two types of scales that we're concerned with, major and minor. The major scale is pretty straightforward. It has 7 notes, with the 8th note being the octave. The scale is a mix of whole steps and half steps, and it sounds like this. The minor scale is a little more complicated. It has one main characteristic, which is the minor third scale degree. But the minor scale comes in 3 different flavors. These are natural minor, melodic minor, and harmonic minor. A quick history on scales. Originally, we used to have things called modes instead of scales. Each mode was a series of 7 notes, just like today's major and minor scales. These modes were classified by the note that they started on. The Ionian mode started on the note C, and that's where we get the major scale. The Aeolian mode started on the note A, and that's where we get the natural minor scale. But there was something lacking with the natural minor scale. Because the 7th note was a whole step away from the octave, it didn't have the necessary pull required in its dominant chords. So at some point, composers started raising the 7th 1/2 step. Now this was great for harmony, but it led to a problem in the melody. The interval between the 6th and the 7th scale degrees became a minor third, which is not good for conjunct or stepwise melodic motion. So they raised the 6th as well. This led to the melodic minor scale. The main differences then with these scales is how they treat the 6th and 7th scale degrees. The melodic minor has both raised 6th and 7th scale degrees. The natural minor has a flat 6th and flat 7th scale degree. The melodic minor tends to be used in melody when it is ascending through the 6th and 7th scale degrees, and the natural minor tends to be used when the melody is descending. Listen to these examples. But the scale we are primarily concerned with right now is the harmonic minor scale. It has the lowered 6th scale degree and the raised 7th scale degree. All of these notes also have chords built off of them using thirds to create triads and 7th chords. I won't go too much into depth about those because we've already covered triads, 7ths, and their inversions in previous lessons. So let's get on to the good stuff. Let me introduce you to functional harmony. Functional harmony was pioneered by a theorist named Hugo Riemann in the late 1800s. Basically, he wanted to be able to classify why chords work the way they did. What he did was identify that certain chords tend to lead to certain other chords. He called these tendencies functions and labeled 3 main functions. These functions are tonic, dominant, and subdominant, which I prefer to call predominant so as not to confuse it with the name of the 4th scale degree. The reason is these functions actually encompass more than just 3 different chords. So it's important that you don't necessarily connect the name of the function only with one chord. The first function is tonic. Tonic function is what we have been referring to as the home key. It's the point in harmony that all the other harmonies want to go. Tonic is normally represented by the 1 chord, also called the tonic chord, but it can also be represented by the 6th chord. This case is most evident with the deceptive cadence. The next function is dominant. Dominant is kind of like the antagonist to the tonic. The dominant function is normally fulfilled by the 5 chord or the 5/7 chord, but it can also be fulfilled by the 7 chord in first inversion or the 7 diminished 7th chord. The main thing about dominant function is it must resolve to tonic harmony. You may see dominant type chords in non-functional positions, like in sequential progressions, which we're going to talk about in the next lesson. But these aren't necessarily dominant functional chords. The main goal of the dominant function is to confirm the tonic key. It does this with the raised leading tone. Remember, in the harmonic minor, we raise the 7th note. This is what gives us sufficient pull to confirm the tonic. The last function is predominant. The purpose of the predominant function is to lead to the dominant. Predominant is normally fulfilled by the 4 chord, the 2 chord, or the 2/6 chord, or by other chords known as applied dominants. An applied dominant is basically the dominant of a chord other than tonic. It is a type of chromatic harmony, which I'll be talking about in the next lesson. So let's talk about how these functions are used. It should be obvious that as a general scheme, you have the tonic function, which moves to the predominant function, and then that moves to the dominant function, which then leads back again to the tonic function. This is actually a very common type of progression, and although it can be used by itself, there's a lot more options to the composer. A great tool for using functional harmony is in a book called A Geometry of Music by Dmitry Tomashko. This chart makes it really easy to come up with your own chord progressions. There are basically a few rules for the chart. You can always move rightward from one chord to another by any amount. Chords can move leftwards only along the arrows. When 1 moves to 6 and back to 1, it's normally a 1/6 chord. The 7 chord in first inversion also usually moves back to 1, either as a neighbor chord or as a dominant function chord. Listen to a few examples from the chart. The best part about the chart is that it works pretty much the same way in minor. Let's look at how we would use this in the context of a sentence. We know there are certain parts of the sentence that accomplish specific tasks. First, there's the basic idea. The main purpose of the basic idea is to establish tonic. So with that, we know we probably want to start with a tonic chord. Next, we have a repetition of the basic idea. This repetition's goal was to prolong the tonic. The purpose of prolongation is to extend what we recognize as the harmony without literally having the harmony played continuously. Listen to this example. Basically, you can recognize prolongation because it moves back to the original harmony it started from. What this means for us is that you can use pretty much any harmony there as long as it fits the rules of the chart and it sounds good. Finally, we know that we'll have a cadential function at the end of the sentence. Let's say this one ends in an authentic cadence. With an authentic cadence, the goal is to get back to tonic. So we'll want to backtrack and fill in a dominant function chord and then a predominant function chord as well. We'll put in the 5/7 chord and the 2/6 chord. But any of these functional chords can be replaced with similar functional chords. For instance, we could replace the 5/7 with a 7 chord in first inversion. It will sound like this. You may have already picked up on this, but the key to the functional chords being interchangeable is the fact that they share common tones. Tonic shares C and E with the submedian. Dominant shares the leading tone and sometimes the 4th scale degree with the 7 chord. And predominant chords are built mostly around the 4th scale degree and also share the 6th. At this point, print out the functional harmony worksheet and come up with a few different chord progressions of your own. Use them to create a sentence and a period. Try out using your basic ideas from earlier lessons. In the next lesson, we're going to look at modal mixture, or mixing major and minor chords, and we'll also learn about the different types of chord progressions. I'm really excited about the next couple of lessons, so stay tuned. As usual, if you found this lesson through a friend or you found it on YouTube and you want to have access to the rest of the course, go to artofcomposing.com and sign up for the newsletter.